Hi, I'm Suzanne. Welcome to another episode of Homeland Improvement.
We're at Barbara's house in the city of Chicago. She's got a real nice bungalow, but she's got a nasty crack that keeps coming back. In fact, they've lived here for 20 years. Her husband has patched this a number of times, and this nasty crack just keeps coming back. In today's program, we're going to solve this problem. We're going to eliminate this crack permanently. Number one, you can see that her husband actually patched this already. All he used was drywall compound that you buy in a 5-gallon bucket, and he put it on. Well, there's a big opening here, and there's a lot of stress in this area because of the door frame. But a lot of these older plaster homes have a problem where the walls simply dry out and the plaster lets go. So to fix that properly, we need to take this out and put the proper thing in. So you can see here, I hope the camera can pick this up, but this crack is already there. A lot of times you'll see plaster shrink after you put it on too thick. Well, this didn't shrink, so I know that he put on a few coats, so he was doing the right thing. You never want to put plaster on too thick. You want to kind of put it on thin coats at a time if you have a heavy area to fill. And that's what he did here. But what happened was that nasty crack keeps coming back because it needs to be sealed with something more than just plaster. So we're actually going to cut this out. I love this house. I love the ceilings that they have here. It's really, really attractive how they molded all of this plaster in. We're just about, I would say, into, see now that's, you want to go around and tap with the hammer. You want to get all of this bad stuff that he put in out, especially like that. Because if you don't, you're going to have that nasty crack come back. If we get this out completely, and we're going to show you what we're going to fill it with. If you have any nails or anything sticking out, you kind of want to either pull them or pound them in, tap them in. I like tapping them in. Sometimes when you go to pull something like this, you're going to create more harm than good. Before you start doing any kind of patching to an area like this, any kind of drywall patching, when you have really, really dry walls, I really suggest taking a spray bottle with good old H2O, that's water, and spray it down really well. That helps the adhesion of whatever you're going to be putting into an area like this, anything you're going to be patching with. Now, instead of just using regular plaster, we're using something called mortar set, and it's a rapid set like a cement. These are plaster walls, but you can also use this in a home where you have drywall. It works in both applications. We've done a number of homes where we've had problems with nasty cracks like we have here. For 20 years they've been patching this, fixing it. Her husband's really been working hard trying to get this thing, and it's really beat him up. She called the show and asked if I would give them advice. I says, let me come by and take a look at it. This is really an interesting thing that I think a lot of you can benefit from. And unless you know what you're doing with something like this, you'll have that nasty crack keep coming back. But doing it this way, you can even take a little water and wet this area down. It prevents it from setting up way too fast. That's another bad thing. You don't want something like this setting up really, really fast. Now, we're dealing with a patch that's a cement. It's actually not a plaster. So we're going to actually put it even in here because we're having a problem with this beautiful ceiling here where it's actually coming back. So we're going to fill it in with that. I do suggest wearing rubber gloves, and I do have them here. I just forgot to put them on between filming and doing everything we're doing. We're working with something that sets up fairly quick. Starting to set up on me, so I'm going to show you a real neat trick in the industry because you don't want to have to sand or grind this. This is really going to be a hard thing to get off once it completely sets up. This is one of the coolest tricks of the trade you'll ever see. Whether you're plastering or doing a patch like this, you just take a brush and brush it in. And that saves you from, let's put a spray on instead of a mist. You just want the water just enough to, I would say, lubricate the area. And you're preventing this patch from setting up way too fast. I've done a lot of these repairs because we've been involved with a lot of homes where there's vibrations because they live near a main street and the streets, a lot of truck traffic and stuff like that. And the older homes are settling and stuff, and people have had problems like this. And by doing, or if you put an addition on a home where you're adding something onto an existing wall in the house, that usually opens you up for having problems down the road. If you're ever having a problem like that, do what you see us doing here. We're using something called a mortar mix. It's designed for plaster. You could actually even use it for concrete and stuff. And if you fix it this way, that nasty crack won't come back. Well, I think we're all procrastinators. We start out and start doing a bunch of projects and we never finish them, or it takes us forever to finish projects. Well, they started this project back about a little over 10 years ago. What happened was they had to replace the roof on the home. Now, 10 years ago, Barbara and her husband wanted skylights put up here for two reasons. One, to let light in. So they didn't even think about saving energy 10 years ago as far as putting daylight in here during the day is what they wanted, but energy wasn't a factor back then. But what was a factor was opening these things up so that you could let the hot air out. Hot air rises. So they put in really good windows that open up, so they have actually a thing to be able to open this up with, and let the hot air out of the house in the summertime. Great idea. Well, they put the roof on 10 years ago, dropped these lights in, but never opened this up. We got involved with the project of patching some nasty cracks in this house, and we came up here and we ended up boxing this in. We cut out the ceiling, wall to wall. We boxed this whole thing in, framed it all in, as you're seeing now, and we went in with the drywall. And now it's plaster time. And this house is really going to be energy efficient because you're going to have daylight in the daytime where you won't have to turn the lights on. When it gets very hot in the summertime, you're going to be able to open these up and let the hot air out. We also replaced, they had an attic fan in here. We also replaced that. The house is about 50 years old. I would venture to say that old attic fan was probably about 50 years old also. And the motor was replaced a number of times, but when they turned it on, it basically sounded like a helicopter. That's how much noise it made. There's 5 bedrooms up on the second floor of this home. And it's very difficult to sleep when you got an airplane going at night. So we actually replaced it with something very efficient, and we boxed all of this in. So this was a great idea that this couple had over 10 years ago. Little did they know that they're really going to benefit from this by saving energy. That's what it's all about, folks. We gotta do things to save energy. We'll save money. We'll save the planet. Well, Barbara's husband Paul came up and wanted to know how you make plaster look flat and don't have that excess. Well, this I actually put on. This was our first coat. Well, it's real rough because we had an issue with our scaffold and our ladder and everything like that here. So if you have this for a first coat, it's okay. But let me give you a great tip on how to knock off some of this without sanding it. In fact, before you even get started with any of your trowels, never use a trowel that you're using for plaster. Never use one of these to do any kind of removing or scraping paint or anything like that. You'll dull the edge, you'll ruin the edge, and you won't get a great plaster job. What I also like to do before I start doing any kind of plastering is I take a sanding block with a fine grade of paper on, about 100, 150 grit sandpaper, and I just run my trowel over it really gently and just make sure that my edge is smooth and it's sharp and it's clean. That'll help you get a real nice plaster job. We might be using 2 of them in this application here, so we'll clean this one up. When you're finished using these, you see how nice they are? They've been used for probably about 5-6 years now. Every time I get done, I take them and wash them immediately to make sure that all of the plaster's off of them. They'll last you a lifetime if you take care of them. And they'll give you that great plastering job. Now, a lot of people would go in to start sanding this. Well, if you do that, you're going to tear up the paper and it's going to really make a mess in the house. What I suggest to do is take a putty knife that's kind of beat, that you use for scraping and chopping and chiseling and stuff like that. Still want to sharpen up that edge. But now what you do is just take and knock off all the roughness, all the rough edges. This saves you a lot of grief and aggravation. And all you're doing, like I say, you're knocking off the rough edges. I can see Paul in the background there, he's watching. He wants to know how you make this drywall look really smooth without having to do a lot of sanding. That is the trick, because the more you sand this stuff, the more dust you put into the air. We actually have one of those machines that's called an aqua sander, where you hook it to a 5-gallon bucket, and the sander is hooked to shop vac, and you're actually sanding, all the dust is going into the 5-gallon bucket with water in it. Any kind of edges you have like this, you just take, never go into it digging for gold here. All you're doing is knocking off an edge. Just go over gently, just knock off the edge. That's all you're doing. Real important. Don't go crazy. A lot of people, I don't know what it is, but I've seen this happen a lot. I've done some work with some friends. I've tried to go over and help them with plastering some walls and that. I did a great job, and I had them sand something down. I said, well, just go and sand it down. And they always over sand. Walls are the most uneven thing in construction. They're always real wavy. What you want to do is just have it so it's smooth, but you're never going to have them flat, not wavy. So now that we have it at this stage of the game, you can do a little bit of water if you'd like, but just gently. It'll help the plaster stick. Now we get into, I love these containers. They're designed for plaster. This is a trowel that we use to feed this container, and this is an older one that's kind of beat up, but we still use it for just those simple applications of working around our plaster. If your plaster is older and it's lumpy, you definitely want to stir it up. That's very, very important. Now, basically all we're going to do is load our trowel, come in. I'm going to try to explain this in a way that you'll understand. You're putting on pressure, but you're not really squeezing it. It sounds kind of ridiculous. I hope you don't, you're applying enough pressure to feed the areas that you need, but you're not pulling it out. So you're actually building it up and filling in the real bad gaps. And you know, something like this application here with this job here, don't be afraid to, Paul was right when he patched downstairs, because what he ended up doing was putting a few coats in. Because if you put this on way too thick, as you're seeing here, it'll shrink. I knew that was going to happen. We had the scaffold up here. We were working up there. I wasn't afraid with the first coat shrinking out. We gave it about 4 days to dry thoroughly. Real important when you're dealing with a project like this, allow it to dry thoroughly. But pull that trowel through where you won't have to do a lot of sanding. Now, when you get into these corners, you kind of want to load it like that and push it in there. And then when you have too big of a buildup like this, you're going to be making a mess. So these little things with the metal, there's a metal thing on here where you can actually clean your trowel. It's real important not to have a lot of blobs hanging off your trowel. The more stuff that hangs off of here, the more chance you have of making a mess. Now, it's okay to feed a bad area with a little more plaster mix. And again, when you have too much, pull it off. Now, I tell people to make a hole in a piece of plaster or gouge it out. Take a piece of drywall, gouge it out, and you see what I just did here? See how pretty that looks? I know I'm going to have to build up here later on. I'm going to have to add another coat up there. But definitely, you're just putting enough pressure on to just feed it. And the wall will glide. It'll help your trowel to fill in the bad spots, and you won't have a lot of sanding to do. I was asked earlier about what do you do with these corners to make them right so that they don't look real wavy going all the way up. This is another interesting point that we can do here. We're going to feed, again, we have a mess here. This is so important. I'm going to probably say this a number of times. When you have a mess like this, get it off. Start out with a clean slate. Now we're going to go and we're going to feed an edge here. And you're going to overfeed it. I want this really filled in well. I'm going to go up one step. I hope the camera can catch us here. I'm going to feed it this way, and we're going to pull it through this way. We're up high enough. Now, again, we're taking a different trowel. So what did I tell you earlier? Even though I know it's clean and I'm the one that cleaned it, got it ready, you just take a piece of sandpaper and just make sure you got a perfect edge. This is so important. It'll make your plaster job so much easier. All we do now is take this and we pulled everything out of there that we didn't need. But what you're doing is forcing what you need in that corner into the corner. So you overload it, then you take this and you drag it through. And again, gently drag it through. You're pulling all the stuff that's not needed. You won't have to be sanding this stuff. One more pass. What do they say in Chicago? Just like downtown. And now we could even take the edge and pull that through and pull this through. Got to tell you a cute little story. Dave's been watching our show for a number of years. I called him up because I have a problem with that office. It's a disaster. Dave comes over to the house. We're going to be building an office on TV. Dave does some of the finest cabinet work in the nation. You've done work all over the United States. You've done stuff in Vegas for, what was the name of that corporation?
Del Webb Corporate.
Del Webb, you did their whole corporate office.
The reception area when you first walk in.
And then you did a couple of the oil companies and stuff.
We've done some work for Rockwell and Amoco, and we've done some work for General Electric, conference tables and reception areas.
We're going to be filming some of the work that Dave has done just to give you an idea of what it's all about and what it takes to build something of quality. This is our countertop and bench that we had for the show Homeland Improvements. You've seen this countertop on probably a half a dozen or a dozen shows. Well, we had that real simple base. It was a metal base, and I put lattice on the front, and I showed it to Dave. I bought some from Mike, and I said, Dave, would you just cover the front? He goes, I wouldn't put my name on it. It's not anywhere I want to go. And I hear this a lot from people. You say one thing, and we all try to like fix something or redo something that's old and this and rickety, and it's not the way to go. And you go, it'd be better just to build you something.
Sometimes it's just easier just to build from new.
So then we started talking, and Dave goes, listen, you got a nice show. It's real professional. I love what you're doing. Let's build you something nice. Right? Isn't that what you said?
Yes.
So you and I have spent about 4 hours on this now designing it because you want me to have what I want. And that's what you do with your customers, right?
Right. And in this case, we're designing it around the existing countertop. He already had the countertop. We both seem to feel this is a nice countertop.
And then we went into a laminate color that was really nice. It's like a neutral color, which I liked. But I like these blues, and we went into this. Now these new, let's talk a little bit about these laminates. Now they got these new laminates that are like metal, right?
That is actual metal, perforated metal.
So we picked this, I picked this out. You didn't really want to go. You do a lot of wood, and I respect wood. I love wood. It's the warmest, nice looking thing in the world. Natural wood it's beautiful. But for television, it just doesn't show up as well. And we wanted something to make the show look kind of neat. So I came up with this laminate we're going to put on the front of here. You already built me a whole new piece. I wanted to go out here because we're going to put lights underneath. And then you came up with another idea. Instead of putting the neutral color all the way down, you're building me an actual, like a wave. What do you call this?
An applied panel.
Applied panel.
With like a wave or curve to the top of it.
And we're going to use this down here also.
Yes, and we feel as though that's going to give a little more balance rather than just using it here or here. We're going to try it in both locations.
And then instead of going like all the way to the edge in that, you came up with an idea of leaving looks like about 2 inches on each side.
I think that's going to give the panel a raised effect, and it will cast a little shadow all around it too. So I think it's going to make it stand out a little bit more, but I think it's actually going to blend in with all the colors in the design a little bit better also. So hopefully when it's all done, we've got a very nice piece.
And we're going to have a great new anchor desk, I'm calling it, for the show. We're really moving in a great direction. I hope you're enjoying the show, Homeland Improvements. I'm loving this. We're meeting a lot of real professional people, just doing that Remodeler show down at McCormick Place. We met some really interesting people. I called Dave. He ends up telling me he watches the show. We're working real hard on putting some great shows together. You're going to love the rest of this show.
I'd like to introduce my sons who have really helped me with my business over the years. This is my son Eric and my son Alex. They've been a big part of my company and hopefully will still be with me in the future.
Big screen TVs, they've become a phenomenon. Everybody wants a big screen TV. We have a 65-inch big screen TV here. This is in Dave's house. Dave built an entertainment center for this big screen TV. Everything here is round. It's all done in rosewood. This is a gorgeous piece. Just the workmanship alone. There's over 250 hours of craftsmanship to build something like this. All I can tell you is when I saw this thing the first time, all the wood is just laid in perfectly. I looked around. I never looked to pick things apart because I know what it takes to do some of this work. I'm never going to be on this level, but you always kind of look at the edges to see if everything just fits perfect. Everywhere you look on this, the craftsmanship is just beyond belief. It's all perfect. Over 250 hours. Rosewood, they even took, and they have the grain moving in the centers going up and down, and around the bottom and the top, they have everything going in the other way with the grain to kind of frame it up. I asked about this because I was wondering, what would you do with something like this? And Dave was explaining that you want to take and frame things up with the wood grain to make it look nice. Boy, look what you can do with your entertainment center. Build something gorgeous, and I mean literally gorgeous like this.
Thanks for watching another episode of Homeland Improvement.
If you'd like to see more shows like this, we're available to come and shoot other museums or unique things in the automotive industry. If you have a product or service, sponsor one of these shows or become a sponsor, a regular sponsor on our show. You can always contact me at richiez.com. That's www.richiez, Z like in zebra, IE.com, richiez.com. Or you can call me direct at 312-841-2560. Help keep this gorgeous type of programming together. We don't have any drama. We just tell the history of the automobile industry.